How's it going, Jack Tackers, and welcome back to another video for you guys. Today we're going to be continuing the Rocky Review-athon with, of course, Rocky 3, which came out in the great old year of 1982, and this is also directed by Sylvester Stallone. Obviously, Rocky 2 was directed by him as well, and I'm pretty sure Sylvester Stallone directs Rocky 4, and then it returns with John G. Avildsen for Rocky 5, and then I don't know who directs Rocky Balboa. I think Sylvester Stallone directs that one too. Anyway, let's get into this review here. We got a lot to go over, and overall, I'm going to preface this review with the fact that this is going to be a fairly positive review. If you're looking for me to bash Rocky 3, this is not the review for you. However, I will also say this movie is a clear decline in quality, step down from quality, whatever you want to call it, from the first two Rocky films. Now, as I mentioned in my Rocky 2 review, I actually was a really big fan of Rocky 2. Matter of fact, I thought it was on par with the original. I don't think it's better than the original. I think the original is still the best film, but Rocky 2 is still fantastic, but this movie for me was a clear decline in quality, and we'll discuss why in a minute, but overall, I still enjoyed the movie a fair amount. I still like this. You got the Eye of the Tiger in this one, and that's, great song and good little montage sequences with that song being used. You also have Mr. T as Clubber Lang as the new antagonist of the film, and he's a pretty good antagonist. He's no Apollo Creed, and we'll talk about Apollo in a minute, but Mr. T as Clubber Lang is still pretty fun. I pity the fool. It's good stuff. Mr. T brings his A game. He's really good in this movie. I like it. And this movie overall is very 80s, which I don't know how I feel about that aesthetic when it comes to Rocky. Obviously, as I mentioned, it came out in 82. This is the first Rocky sequel that came out in the 80s. The first two came out in the 70s. And, you can definitely tell that they're having a bit more fun. It's a bit more goofy, if you will. And the overall vibe of the movie is very meta. And what I mean by that is there are multiple instances where you have like bands or people with instruments playing the Gonna Fly Now song from obviously the first movie. I mean, we first hear it in the first movie. And I'm a little confused. I might have missed something, but does that song actually exist within the Rocky universe? Like, I always thought that was just a song we as the audience were hearing. I didn't think that was an actual song that any of the characters in the universe were listening to, or that song existed in the universe. Hopefully I'm explaining that correctly. Let me know down in the comments if I missed something. I don't think I did, but yeah, there's multiple instances in this film where you have a band playing Gonna Fly Now. It's a little weird and off-putting. You also have the Hulk Hogan fight, which is kind of, I don't know how I feel about that. I mean, there's definitely way more fights in this movie. You can tell that they wanted to have a bit more action, I guess, in this film. And also, speaking of which, you have a little bit more action in this movie, but this movie is also only like 99 minutes, I think. So it's a lot shorter than the previous two movies by like almost a half hour-ish around there. And yet you still have so much action. It feels like they kind of took a backseat from some of the character drama, even though there still is character drama in this, which we'll get into that in a minute. There are some sad moments and dramatic moments in this movie for sure. I don't want to stray away from that. But you have the Hulk Hogan fight, getting back to that, as Thunderlips. Hulk Hogan as Thunderlips. Hulk Hogan's a wrestler as far as I know. I don't know that much about wrestling or anything, but it felt weird having a wrestler go against Rocky, who's obviously a boxer. It kind of felt a little weird and, again, as I say, goofy. Anyways, though, in terms of the more dramatic side of things, we do have the death of Mick. Man, that is sad. It was a sad moment for sure. I really wasn't expecting when I had first seen this movie for him to die, and that was very sad and tragic, and that definitely does put Rocky on a very interesting developmental path, I guess you could say. And there is some neat little moments with Rocky in here. First of all, you have him living this high life now. Rocky is famous, and I think that's kind of interesting, but I did read a couple reviews on Letterboxd, people saying that he kind of loses his underdog, relatability a little bit, because now he's like the king of the world almost, and he's, got a mansion and whatever. And in the second movie, you definitely notice that he's moving up in the world a little bit. I mean, just in terms of him getting more money for himself, but it was still like acceptable. He got a better house for him and Adrian in the second film. But in this one, yeah, he's living in a freaking mansion, and it feels a little weird at moments. moment seeing Rocky at such a high point in his life. I mean, you feel happy for him, don't get me wrong. Like, you're like, yay, Rocky, he deserves this. And yes, Rocky absolutely deserves this. But it is a little weird, and it does kind of lose the underdog relatability to it a little bit. However, this film kind of counteracts that a little bit with us seeing Rocky pretty much lose against Clubber Lang towards the, maybe like halfway through the movie, but then by the end, of course, Rocky comes in and defeats Clubber Lang, and it's a good moment and whatever. And so you do have that. We do actually see Rocky lose a fight, and that's dramatic. So I think that's a pretty good moment in this movie, to be honest. And one I wish they played up a little bit more instead of showing the weird Hulk Hogan fight. I don't know. Do people like the Hulk Hogan fight in this movie? I don't know. But anyway, then we have Apollo Creed come into the picture, and Apollo is basically helping Rocky train to with a rematch against Clubber. And I really love Apollo Creed in this movie. I mentioned how he isn't really a villainous guy in the first two movies. He just, he's a bit of a sore loser, to be honest, but Apollo and Rocky are basically friends by the end of this movie, and I really like that, to be honest. I love the character of Apollo Creed and Apollo helping Rocky, which, I'll be honest, Apollo helping Rocky after the death of Mick, of course, it makes sense, but it also doesn't, because technically Rocky's better than Apollo Creed. I mean, he's proven this before, so I don't know, but Apollo's still a great fighter. Don't get me wrong, Apollo is still one of the best fighters out there, but yeah, it didn't really make that much sense. It was like, well, if Rocky has beaten Apollo, then how is he going to beat Clubber by being trained by Apollo? I don't know. It didn't really make that much sense. Also, I do want to mention at the beginning of this movie, we do basically do a rehash of the ending of the second Rocky film, which I mentioned in my Rocky 2 review, how I said I didn't really like how they basically showed the ending of the first movie again. It kind of felt like they were just, they wanted to squeeze it in there for no real reason. I mean, it definitely recontextualizes certain things, don't get me wrong, but I'm glad they shortened that at the beginning here, because I was kind of wondering, like, why do we keep needing to see the end fights that happened at the end of the previous movie? But they definitely shortened it in this movie, so I appreciate that. And obviously the ending fight with Clubber and Rocky in this film is pretty good. I don't think it's quite as intense as the previous movie, but it's a good fight. Like, I don't think it's that bad or anything. And I really enjoyed this movie overall. I don't love it. Again, the 80s vibe and kind of Rocky losing his relatability in terms of him not really being an underdog anymore. But I don't know. There's certain moments in this where it's a little weird. It's not quite as good as it's not quite as strong, maybe I should say, as the first two. But I still like it overall. But let me hear your thoughts on this movie down in the comments below. And if you liked this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you're new. And I'll see you in the next one. Peace.